my wife, my family, we've been on this massive journey this year, an adventure of moving to a brand new city, Birmingham, in the heart of the UK, planting a church. And one of the big adventures, the exciting things, is finding this amazing building smack in the center of the city. It was a disused kind of warehouse. Oh, thank you very much. Disused warehouse, like a factory. And historically, it was used as a place where they generate gas. In England, we call them a gas retort house. Pretty cool, a gas retort house. And you generate gas, and the gas would be used in all the street lamps in the cities around. And obviously with energy power changing and kind of gas being old school, the building became redundant and basically useless and was lying empty for about 40 years. And we saw this building, thought this would be unbelievable to have a church. And so we managed to buy it and we've renovated it. And now this old, disused, kind of useless factory has become a place that's alive with worship and people. And this building that used to be a source of light to the streets in Birmingham, now we've sort of taken that. We feel that's a kind of God-given metaphor, a picture for us, that we feel called to be a people who carry light to the city of Birmingham. But not just a temporary light, an everlasting light that can transform lives, the light of the world. And it just struck me that that's everything that God is about, taking something that's often disused, redundant, transforming into something alive that can make a difference. And in Matthew 5, Jesus says these incredible words. Matthew 5:14, he says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." Now, when you read those verses, the thing that strikes me is crazy how much trust Jesus puts in each and every one of us. The confidence the Savior of the world has in us is unbelievable, that he would say, "You are the light of the world. You are the light of the world." Now, we're familiar when Jesus says in John 8, "I am the light of the world." We kind of get that. Yeah, of course, Jesus, you're the light of the world. But maybe we struggle to understand or to take it in that we also are the light of the world. And, is Jesus got confused? Is he contradicting himself? Which is it? Is he the light of the world, or are we the light of the world? And of course, it is both. When we open up our hearts fully to Jesus, we begin to carry his light wherever we go. And many of us struggle to fully embrace this God-given identity, these purposes and plans he has for us to be light in this world. And tragically, for many of us, we become so aware of our weaknesses, our limitations, our struggles, that we do the very thing he tells us not to do, which is to hide our light under a bucket. And often we take different buckets. For some, it might be the bucket of shame. And you say, if you knew me, if you knew the things that I'd done, if you knew my past, the bad choices I've made, the relationships I've messed up, if you knew the thought life I have, if you knew the struggles, then you'd never say that I was the light of the world. And the truth is, if Jesus was here right now, he'd look you in the eye and he'd say, "You are the light of the world. Shine." For others, the bucket might be insecurity, and you say, I haven't got what it takes. I haven't got the skills. I'm not confident enough in my faith. I'm not a gifted communicator. I'm not courageous like others. I haven't got the right kind of gift set. I can't do it. I am not light. And if Jesus were here, he'd look you in the eye and he'd say, "You are the light of the world. Shine." And for some, it's fear. You're consumed with fear. What if I step out and it goes horribly wrong? What if I take a risk and I fall flat on my faith? What if I share my faith with someone at work and I get mocked or persecuted for it? I'm just not ready. I haven't got what it takes. And Jesus, again, would stand here and he'd encourage you and he'd say, "You are the light of the world. Shine. Shine." I want to encourage all of us that we are God's people, that we are light. And God is calling us to be a people that shine in the darkest place. And light obviously does two things, doesn't it? One of the first things light does is it dispels darkness. And it exposes that which is bad. When my wife and I were recently married, newly married, we went to Malaysia. And we had someone from Malaysia? You are, brilliant. Wow, amazing. Have you come all the way just for this conference? No, okay. You could have pretended. Come on, man. So we're in Malaysia, and we were staying in this nice hotel, and we'd gone to bed, lights were off, and suddenly my wife wakes me up and says, Tim, I can hear a rustling noise. I'm like, no, go back to bed. A few minutes later, I can hear a rustling noise, wake up. So we turn the light on, and we can see, just as I turn the light on, this kind of, it's either a tail or something slither under the curtains, and I'm like, you know, what is this? Is this a snake? Is this a rat? Is this something deadly that's going to kill us? So we're both standing on the bed, freaking out. And because we're recently married, I'm like, oh no, I've got to be the man here. I've got to kind of show that I'm not a wimp. You know, if it happened now, I'd say, you go and sort it out. But obviously, you know, this is early days in the marriage. I'm still trying to impress. And so Rachel's like, you got to go and sort this out. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I'm sort of creeping towards the curtains. And as I sort of pull the curtains away, this mouse just shoots across to the cupboards. And I just begin to scream. I stand on the bed. I'm like, it's a mouse. We're going to die. And absolute pandemonium. And this tiny little thing's crawling across the room. And we're like, what are we going to do? And we're literally standing on the bed for about 10 minutes, shaking. And eventually, we think we just got to get out of the room. We've got to get to safety. You know, our health and safety is the number one priority in this moment. So we charge out of this hotel room. The only thing we can grab on the way out are those, dressing gowns, the white fluffy dressing gowns. So we put those on. We go downstairs to the front lobby. As we're walking to the front lobby, there's this amazingly fancy kind of posh dinner party going on, like this ball, and people are in tuxedos and ball gowns, and then we're trying to look dignified, you know, in these dressing gowns, walking to the front desk. And we go up to the front desk and say, look, we've got an emergency, there's a mouse in our room, you know, it's very, very serious, we need help. And so they send this guy, and this guy turns up, and he walks us back to the room, and the only thing he's carrying is a sort of watering spray can. I'm like, mate, you're going to need traps, you're going to need nets. You know, I'm thinking probably guns. You got to get ready for this. And he's walking with us, and he's this kind of small little guy, and he's chuckling, and he says, you know, mouse, very small, you, very big. And we go into this room, and suddenly I'm starting to feel a little bit embarrassed, and that's a good point, actually. And he eventually catches the mouse, and he's walking out chuckling, you know, very small, very big. And it's one of those humiliating moments in life. But light, when we shine, we begin to expose that which is not right, that which is bad, that which is evil. And as the people of God, as we begin to carry the light of Christ wherever we go, suddenly things are seen for what they are. Suddenly attitudes of racism aren't okay. Misogyny or selfishness, pride, jealousy, competitiveness. And as the people of God, as we carry Christ wherever we go, suddenly we encourage people to live better lives. I've got a friend, he's an amazing drummer. He used to drum for Amy Winehouse and has done a bunch of albums, produced some amazing artists. And he was playing, had a studio gig with a really top band. Many of you would have heard of them. And it was a really great opportunity for him. And he's in the studio, and he's about to start tracking the drums. And he begins to hear the songs. And the songs, and a lot of the lyrics are really blasphemous, offensive, really kind of anti-God. And as he's drumming on the first couple of tracks, he's beginning to feel more and more uneasy, uncomfortable. And he's like, I just can't do this. I just can't be a part of something that is so outwardly attacking something that's so precious to me. So he he kind of steps up away from the drum kit and he says, guys, I'm so sorry, but I'm a Christian and these songs actually are attacking something that's so precious and important to me. I just can't be a part of this. And he leaves the studio thinking, I've blown it, burned my bridges, this amazing opportunity is gone. And he feels terrible, but he knows as a follower of Christ, as a light in the darkness, he had to make a stand. And amazingly, the next day, the lead singer of the band calls him up and says, we were so amazed at your response. And actually, we're so keen to have you drum on the album. We've rewritten a bunch of the lyrics. And would you come and drum? And of course, he did. And it's just this unbelievable opportunity. But someone who was willing to be light in darkness, who is willing to be everything that Jesus said, you are the light of the world. And as he stepped up and he wasn't afraid to hide the light under a bucket, God blessed him. God used him and God began to shine light on attitudes, ways of behavior that weren't best. Wherever we go in our places of work, places of study, family and friends, not on a crusade, but as we just become everything that God calls us to be, we should begin to change culture, change the atmosphere, change patterns of thinking, that a way of thinking and speaking of women suddenly, no, that's not okay. Can't treat women like that. We want to speak well and treat them as our sisters or whatever it is. That suddenly we can't see the outside as someone to protect ourselves from, to build walls, to keep them out. No. The gospel says we open up our hearts and our homes to welcome in the alien and the stranger. When the people of God shine in the darkness begins to be dispelled and pushed back. We need to rise to be confident in everything God has for us. So light dispels darkness, but also light reveals beauty. When you go into a room, you turn the light on so that you can see all these amazing things that we have to enjoy. It's like, I don't know if you've had the experience, you turn up somewhere on holiday in the middle of the night and, you look out the window, but you can't really see anything. And then you awake in the morning and suddenly, this beautiful view, vista, rolling fields. I was staying in this hotel and the first morning woke up and the light shining through and you see out over Vancouver City and you see the water and you think, wow, this is amazing. This is stunning. So light reveals beauty. And in this passage, Jesus is saying, you are the light of the world. And this idea that he is placed within us, something so precious. He's placed his very presence within us that wherever we go, people begin to see something and it's compelling and it's attractive and it's glorious. Literally, people should be stopping and staring, saying, wow, what is that? How are you living like that? It's an amazing thing if you look at the life of Jesus. Wherever he went, whatever the person was, they were fascinated, compelled completely by his character. When you walk into a room, hope walks in. Do you know that? When you walk into a room, hope walks in. How do we know that? Because the Word of God says it's Christ in you, the hope of glory. When you walk into a room, light comes. The Word of God says that we have the mind of Christ. So we should be a people full of amazing creative ideas, solutions that impact the way businesses can run, creative ideas that bring joy and life to so many people. We should be the people of God most alive because we have the light of Christ living within us. Over the summer, I read this amazing book on this man called Eric Liddell. I don't know if some of you have seen the film Chariots of Fire. And he was this incredible sprinter. And in the 1924 Paris Olympics, he was odds-on favorite to win the 100 meters. And he's a very strong Christian. And as he got to the Olympic Games, discovered that one of the heat rounds was on a Sunday, the Sabbath. And he'd made a vow that he'd never do sport on the Sabbath. And so he pulled out of the race. And many people were devastated. He's Britain's one hope of winning a gold. And he was out of it. And people were really cross and upset. Anyway, they managed to make it work for him to run in the 400 meters. But the 400 meters is a completely different race. Different tactics, different muscles, different everything. And so no one thought he had a chance. The favorites didn't even think of him as a true threat. And it came to the final, and the gun went off and he exploded out of the blocks, and he just began sprinting. And he just kept on sprinting. And he eventually got to the finishing line, and he surged through the finishing tape, and he'd completely smashed and decimated the world record, and he won a gold, and the place went crazy. He returned back to Great Britain just an absolute hero and a legend, and everyone was like, whoa, what are you going to do next? The world is your oyster. You are world famous. You're celebrated all over the world. And he said, I'm going to go and be a missionary in China. And no one could understand it. But he said, no, God's called me to be a missionary in China. And he moved to China and he began to serve in these villages, serving the poor. And in 1937, Japan invaded China and war broke out between the two nations. And he ended up being put in a concentration camp where people were mistreated, the food was appalling, the conditions were atrocious, so much abuse and neglect, devastating darkness. And he began to shine. He began to bring light and hope. He began to find ways of entertaining the kids so that they wouldn't get too kind of caught up in despair. He began to look after those who were vulnerable. He began to share his food. He began to pray for people. He began to just offer hope. And after a few years in the concentration camp, tragically, he died. And at his funeral, one of the people who was in the camp with him said this of Eric Liddell: we confided in him. We went to him for advice. We looked on him as probably the most perfect and honorable Christian friend we had ever known. And the whole camp feels that in losing Eric, they've lost a real friend. He was loved by everyone. Check this bit out. It is my prayer that I may live like Eric Liddell. A life that is exemplary, lovely, useful, and full of caring service to others. In that dark place, he lived as the light of the world, and people looked at him and said, I want to live like you. I want to live like that. I want to have that hope. I want to have that kindness. I want to have that energy to give myself to those in need. When we live as the people of God, when we shine with the light of Christ blazing within us, people should look at us and think, I want to live like that. I want what you have. I want what you have. So how can we shine as lights in the darkness? The amazing man Desmond Tutu, Archbishop in South Africa, he said this: we are only the light bulb, and our job is to remain plugged in. That's our job. We're just light bulbs. But when we plug into the power source of Christ, suddenly we begin to shine. So a few things that I've found have helped me to keep plugging in to the light of Christ. Firstly, we've got to be a people of God's presence. There's been a theme running throughout this day, being a people of God's presence, spending time in his presence, growing in an understanding of who he is. Because I can tell you this, our understanding of who God is will determine everything about how we live. Our understanding and view of who God is will determine everything about how we live. And the tragedy is, for some of us, our view of God is too small, way too small. When we begin to allow our eyes to be open to the vast, wide, glorious, majestic space that God is, we begin to grow too in his likeness. We need to spend time with him. In Exodus, we see Moses spent 40 days, 40 nights in God's presence. He goes up to top of Mount Sinai, spends time with God. And when he comes back down after 40 days and 40 nights, the people of Israel look at him and say, whoa, your face is shining. We can't handle it. Please wear a veil. He has to wear a veil because his face is shining so brightly. 40 days, 40 nights. And some of us think a couple of snatched moments in God's presence here and there will be enough. What does it look like for us just to fully immerse ourselves in the presence of God? There are these conversations going on all around us every day. These 4 key conversations happening every day. And in fact, I've got a picture in a moment I'm going to show you. I've invested a huge amount of energy, effort into this. I'm actually thinking this is going to be a new resource that we're going to package and sell. It's a personal piece of art that I'm very, very proud of. And I think, well, you're going to be quite blown away, I think, for some of you. I think this could be kind of a very significant, game-changing moment for you. So if we can just have a look at this image that I've worked on for you. Come on. It gets better. I'm going to be signing these and selling them at the end. So, actually, if you buy that, you get a free Hillsong album. We're trying to get rid of the... Poor Ben brought suitcases, loads of them, and... So this first conversation we have, and the most important conversation, is this conversation between God and us, allowing him to speak his words of life over us. Hopefully the next slide you'll see, there we go. It's just like, it's the gift that keeps giving. And so there's this amazing conversation that God has where he pours out love and affirmation over us. You know, it's amazing when Jesus is baptized. Before he's performed any miracle, any public activity, before he's preached a sermon, before he's demonstrated any kind of public act of compassion, he's baptized and the heavens open and his Father proclaims over him, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." And Jesus lived his life out of that assurance, that confidence that he was called, he was chosen, he was loved. My brother is an amazing leader, leads a church in London. And from a young age, he was kind of really raised up as a leader and as a preacher. And he began to kind of live under this narrative that I perform, therefore I'm loved. And this cycle, you know, if I preach well, I get more affirmation. If I make a great leadership decision, then people praise and celebrate me. If I have a great creative idea, then people think I'm amazing. And this kind of narrative began to define him more and more and more. I perform, therefore I'm loved. But the truth is, for every one of us who live under that narrative, there's a moment where it's not enough. And we come crashing down. And he realized that he couldn't keep up that narrative. And he came to a place of utter brokenness before God, saying, "Lord, you're going to have to change me." And he has found healing and wholeness in this new way of living, in the new narrative, which is this: I am loved. Therefore, I'm free to perform. I am loved. You know, if I preach great, wonderful. If I don't preach great, well, I'll try again the next time. It's not going to define me. There's these conversations going all around in our everyday life. And if we don't tune into the most important conversation of all, if we don't plug in to the truth and the reality that we are loved, we are called, we are chosen, we are going to struggle through this life. You know, some of us here, you live in this permanent state of insecurity. You're constantly holding back. But God would say over you, "You are my son, you are my daughter, I love you, I'm pleased with you." He would say of you that the same power that raised Jesus Christ from the grave lives in you. He would say over you that he that is in you is greater than he that is in the world. He would say over you that you are perfectly, fearfully, and wonderfully made. He would say over you, "You are the apple of my eye." Go for it. Go for it. Don't hide back. Live big, expansive lives. We need to tune in to the Word of God who says, "You are the light of the world." Because you see, there's a second conversation that goes on every day, and it's an enemy who would say, who try to disrupt and corrupt and manipulate and destroy. You know, Jesus describes Satan as the father of all lies. Father of all lies. And that's what he does. He just sows seeds of lies that get into our thinking, that begin to distract and limit us. And we begin to live under these lies. You know, a few weeks ago, I had an email from someone who's really cross with me about something. And threw a whole bunch of accusations at me and ended the email saying, "You are a complete failure as a leader." And initially I thought, maybe that's true, and there's a bit of you that begins to, yeah, maybe that's right. I'm out of my depth. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not experienced enough. And you begin to buy into that lie. And as I was I could see my thought pattern going in this way, I thought, hang on a sec, no, that is not what my Father in heaven would say over me. And you begin to tune in to the voice of the Father and allow that to begin to dictate everything about who you are, how you live, and how you view yourself. For so many people here, I know that you're allowing lies of the enemy to discount you from running the race, from being a light that shines in the darkness. And the only way you can drown out the voice of the enemy is to tune in to a greater voice, the voice of your Heavenly Father. But there's a third conversation. It's the conversation we have with ourselves. One of the big philosophies of our age, I'd say, is be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. This is who you are. This is how you want to live. Have integrity and be true to yourself. But the problem with that is the reality that it's the self that's the problem. I know me. I know the things in my heart, the pride and the envy and the lust and the ego, and I don't trust myself. I know that I'm fallen, broken, corrupt in many ways without Christ. I love what Paul says in Romans 7. He says, "I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I do not want to do, I do." I mean, how many of you feel you live your life in that? I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say that. I've just said it. Or like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I didn't do it. And our self is the problem. Martin Luther, the great German reformer, he said, sin is a life curved in on itself. And without Christ, that's who we are. Without Christ, we are dead. And so we need to understand that it's only because of Jesus' love, only because of Christ at work within us, transforming us from the inside out, that we're changed. So I would never, ever trust myself to navigate my life. And so you tune in to the voice of God. You get plugged into the power source of Christ. And then the final conversation is the conversation that goes around with others, the rest of the world. And we get challenged and squeezed to living lives like the rest of the world. It's the world that begins to dictate our view on sexual ethics, or our view on money, or our view on world politics or affairs. And the values of the age, they're not working. Let's be honest. Two of the big values are consumerism, buy, accumulate, have all these amazing things that you can enjoy. Or another one is individualism. It's all about you. You get to the top. You have a great life. You're worth it. And never have we seen more despair, dislocation, people struggling, people isolated, issues of depression prevalent so much all around. And you think, well, the world doesn't know how to live, where it's going. I watched recently on YouTube, there's this clip. It's this little 14-year-old girl. And she's filmed this little clip, and she's saying, look, people say I'm ugly. I don't know. Am I ugly? What do you think? And she's just asking basically Facebook, what do you think? And the clip has had over 500,000 watches. And there are 23,000 people commenting saying, some are saying, you're beautiful, don't need to ask people. Others are saying, you are really ugly. And horrible, horrible, horrible things. But the thing I thought was, gosh, this girl, how is she ever going to find any sense of worth by just throwing it out there to the masses, to the world? Some of us are looking around, trying to fit in to the values of the age, but there is a bigger kingdom to live for than the values of the age. And so we mustn't live to the conversation going on with others. We've got to tune in to the voice of God. You can take the artwork down now. It's quite enough. I don't want people kind of filming it and then kind of getting out all over social media, if we want to be a light that shines, we've got to stay connected in to the power source of God. We've got to allow him to lead and guide us. But another thing that I've found has been an absolute key way of being a light in the darkness is being a part of a church, being a part of a community where you don't just go along, but you become a part of it. You become a part of the family. Jesus says here, that talks about a city on a hill. And 2,000 years ago, when they didn't have electricity, all they'd have would be torches. And at nighttime, they'd light their different torches. And the hills would be, the city, would be on a hill. And so you could be miles upon miles upon miles away. And you'd see these lights in the distance. And you could think, okay, there's Jerusalem, or there's Bethlehem. And you could find your way to the city. Now, it's amazing for us to shine as lights in our places of work, but when we gather together as God's people, we begin to set each other on fire. We begin to shine even brighter in our cities, and we begin to fire one another up. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then go together. Too many of us, I think, are trying to blaze ahead on our own. We might get fast quick, but we'll die out quick as well. But if we can be plugged into a community where we really share the best and the worst of who we are, wow, what God could do in and through us. God rarely calls individuals, almost always calls a people. So get stuck in to your churches. Keep plugged in. And then the final thing, I end with this, is one of the most important things for us in terms of leading worship, being involved in teams in our churches, trying to live lives full of Christ, is to maintain this wonderful belief that the best is yet to come. That with Jesus Christ, there is always, always, always more. It's so easy, the older we get, the more involved in church we are, to get a little bit cynical, a little bit skeptical. Oh yeah, I've heard all that before. And we just begin to get a bit hardened. But I believe, we were just singing, we need that fresh outpouring. We need to get broken again and hungry again to call on the name of God for more, because there is more. I promise you, there is more. There is more to see in our churches. There's more to see in your lives. There's more to see in your places of work, to see God's kingdom advancing. There is more. And what we need to do is get a little bit more desperate. As we get more desperate, I truly believe we'll begin to see more. I was so struck by this. This is a old Methodist preacher called Hughes, no relation. And he says, this is his daughter actually speaking of him. She said, when he came back on a Sunday night from the service, if no one had been saved, he'd be inconsolable. You couldn't comfort him. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't drink, he wouldn't even take his long coat off. He threw himself on his bed and he sobbed and he sobbed and he sobbed and he said, why? How many of you returned from church last week and if no one became a Christian, were just utterly desolate? Have we got a bit too comfortable, casual, stuck in ruts? And the way we're going to break out is to get a bit desperate, to say, I'm not going to settle with this status quo. God, I believe you can change a city. I believe you can change my school. I believe you can change my church. And I'm going to keep praying, and I'm going to keep longing, and I'm going to keep crying, and I'm going to keep knocking on the door of heaven until I see it happen. Yeah. Maybe, yeah. I got a friend called Sam, and he's been working in this really tough part of Birmingham, socially deprived area for 13 years, praying, calling on God for more, and often feeling really discouraged, which I think, if we're honest, a lot of us feel in that place. God, I've been here for years. I've been praying this prayer for years, and I'm not seeing it. But what I love about Sam is he's just got this beautiful spirit of keeping on going, not giving up. And a few weeks ago, he was walking in this park, and he walked past this guy, and he felt God say to him, this guy's name is Daniel. And he began to think immediately of Daniel in the lion's den. And he felt God say, this guy is in a pit of despair and I want to rescue him. And so he's okay, how do I share this? So he runs back up to this guy and he says, is your name Daniel? And the guy goes, no. And he's like, okay, I've got this wrong. But he feels he needs to share something. So he says, look, it sounds really weird, but I'm a Christian. And I thought maybe your name was Daniel, but there's a person in the Bible called Daniel who gets stuck in a lion's den and God rescues him. And I wondered if you're maybe in a spot of trouble, pit of despair, and I believe God wants to rescue you. This guy's eyes just go wide. And he says, actually, my name is Daniel. And he said, I've been walking around this park trying to find a place to commit suicide. Can we talk? And he takes him to a coffee shop and they spend an hour talking about Jesus. Sam leads him in a prayer to give his life to Jesus, then prays for him to be filled with the Spirit. This guy opens his eyes and he says, what's happened? The world looks different. The world looks different. The next couple of days, he was at church, being prayed for, giving his testimony. And, he's become part of a family. This guy who was unemployed on his own has suddenly been drawn into a family. And now he's got a job working with someone in the church who's a carpenter. And he's just growing in confidence and strength because Sam wouldn't give up. Wouldn't give up. I believe there are many more Daniels that God wants to rescue. He wants to meet with, but it needs people like Sam, like you and me, who just won't give up, who keep making ourselves available, who keep believing, God, the best is yet to come, who keep saying, I'm not going to live my life on my experiences, but I'm going to live my life on the promises of God. I'm not going to allow my setbacks to cause me to give up. I'm going to keep pressing on for more, because the best is yet to come. Jesus would say to each and every one of us, you are the light of the world. So shine, shine, shine.